Hey y'all, I'm Jasmine Prince. I am 31 years old from Birmingham, Alabama, and I am single and adjacent to the streets, but not really in the streets.
Hey y'all, my name is Aaliyah McDaniel from Atlanta, Georgia. I am 22 and I'm on the porch. I'm outside enjoying the weather, but I'm not in the streets. I'm on the porch at my own house.
Hey, I'm Taryn Henning. I'll be 34 in 2 weeks, and it's my birthday month. I'm from Peoria, Illinois, and I am creatively single. Hey y'all, Candace Hargans, 40, just hit 40 this year, feeling good. And I am happily married, meaning I'm in the bed. I'm chilling in the house in the bed. That's where I'm at.
Hi, everybody. Carol Taylor. I will be 52 in October. I am recently divorced, and I'm actually in the front room, looking out the window, but in the house. But still be like, okay. Who that? Oh, who that? Yeah, that's where I am.
Hi, my name is Cynthia Doyle. I'm 28. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. And I didn't realize that my relationship status was tied to a location near a house. Because I think I'm low-key in the woods. So we're just going to
Technically outside.
Technically outside in some way.
It's in the wilderness, though.
In the wild. In the wild.
And when you know what, it's hard out here, so I respect it.
Oh, I just realized I totally forgot. I'm from Lexington, from this lovely place we are here now.
And I'm from Lockport, New York, a small town outside of Niagara Falls.
Okay, well, I guess we're gonna jump right on in. So it's a lot of black girl magic around the table. Y'all do lots of degrees, lots of really dope stuff, both like professionally and personally, that everybody does. And so I'm curious to know, just as ambitious women, sort of how have you navigated the journey to like getting where you are and like finding success in the things that you're passionate about, the things that sort of like bring you money, but also bring you joy.
Well, I'm a social worker, and so I just got money. Money is new. But I think for me, when I was young, I had no idea what I wanted. Well, I did. I wanted to be a fashion designing part-time attorney.
Okay.
And my mother was like, that makes
Okay,
absolutely no
Elwood.
sense. But okay.
I see it, though.
Whatever. But I wound up being a social worker by accident. I accidentally went to a job interview, and they were like, can you do this? Yeah, it's whatever. Can I pay rent with it? And they were like, yeah. Does it come with insurance? Yeah. All right, cool. I ain't got to live with my parents. Great. I can do it. And have been a social worker for 30 years. So it was never my intention to do this. So I sort of fell into it. But I think for me, just kind of navigating child welfare and moving through like training and policy and administration in that place, it really helped me understand how systems that we all depend on impact our life and impact our family in ways that like most people don't recognize. And the people who do recognize it, particularly for Black families, having child welfare folks show up in your life is the worst thing. It's absolutely the worst thing. But that's also where I recognize like the impact of race in different ways than I had before I got into that work, particularly for Black women. Like I recognize Blackness always, but as a Black woman, the way we experience everything in the world is so different than anybody else. Like, no, we don't have like that same kind of experience with any other group of people. It's just us. And so just as a Black woman trying to navigate spaces and navigate through higher ed, transitioning from like government and community-based work and moving into higher education, being a Black woman, being a Black administrator is wild. It is so wild. And I think I've just been able to navigate it because I've always been transparent and honest. My delivery has probably got me in a couple of 2, 3, 10 situations. But like I stand on being authentic. And so have I had to reshape the delivery of some things? Yeah, but like you still gonna get that same sort of energy. And so I think for me that's one of the things that I've had to learn. I haven't always been able to do that, and I had to grow into doing that. But yeah, I accidentally got here. I was not. I should be working on Paris Fashion Week or something, and in the Supreme Court. Part-time
you can
Supreme
do
Court
both.
justice, which they could use right now. But you know, sometimes you don't. At least in my experience, I really didn't have a super clear idea of what I wanted to do, and then sort of fell into work and realized, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like this is what I'm meant to be doing. This is what feeds me as a human being, but also as a Black woman in this world.
That hit for me because I definitely feel like authenticity has been a core principle and guided me toward who I am and what I want to be and what that looks like as it relates to ambition. So I've always been ambitious, and my family invested in me in that way. So we grew up working class, but they were like, if anybody's gonna make it, it's gonna be you. So whatever you need, we're gonna figure out how to get you there. And that's how you become like the first person in your family to graduate and all of that stuff. Because a lot of Black women loved on me and gave me the things that they didn't get. And so anytime I had an idea about something I wanted to try, they were like, go for it, baby. You can do it, girl. And I was like, you're right. I can. And sometimes I would fail, and sometimes I would fly, you know, and that was okay. And so I probably wanted to be a fly girl when I was a kid, you know, in Living Color. I wanted to dance. I've been dancing since I was 3. But when I turned 16 and I was taking a psychology class, that's when I realized, that's why my family is insane. Okay, I want to do this for the rest of my life. I want to be a clinical psychologist. I knew at 16. And there was a moment where I went to college, I went to Spelman, and someone deterred me from that, which was probably one of the first times I'd ever been deterred. They were like, you know, Black people don't see psychologists. Mm-hmm. And I knew I wanted to help Black people in particular. And so I was like, oh, well, what's a place that I can do that? And I chose to go into education. So I taught high school for a few years. And then my classrooms became group therapy anyway. And so it was just like, let me just do the thing that I said I was going to do. And the sex piece of it, so I'm a sex researcher and psychologist, was always kind of a part of that landscape where it was like I was curious about, oh, how is my body going to develop when I was a kid, and looking in the Encyclopedia Britannica related to that. And reading Cosmo magazines and things like that when I was 15 and 16, and being the sex educator for my peers, like, well, this is why you need to use condoms. Like, this is important because. And so when I found out you could also pair sex research and psychology, or sex therapy and psychology, I was like, I found my lane. And my approach to life is to be authentic and excellent. So I'm not excellent because I have anything to prove. I don't have shit to prove to anyone. You know, I came into this world worthy. I'm gonna leave this world worthy. And having Black women who love you kind of reaffirms that, because everything in the world tries to tell you otherwise. Right. And so sometimes you buy into those otherwise messages, but then you have a sister friend who's like, girl, bring it on back because you're worthy. Or a mom who's like, so you just let people run over you. What? We didn't raise you to do that. You know, they'll bring you back. And so navigating all of these systems, one, as a Black woman sex researcher, where we have all these stigma related to our sexual identities, and taking a sex positive lens, taking a liberatory approach. There are a lot of ways academia will try to dissuade you from what you want to be. And I was like, fuck it, if you want me here, I'm gonna be me. And if you don't, I know where else to go. And I think that approach has always been like, if I don't need this job, I can really thrive in this job. And if I do need it, it's gonna constrict the way I can do it and do it well. So I'm gonna be excellent at everything I do because that's my brand. I'm gonna be authentic in what I do because that's my brand. And then people can fuck with it or not. And typically they do. And when they don't, you know, that's their problem.
Words.
I'm not really ambitious. Like, I think I used to be. And I always wanted to do some kind of career that helped people for a long time, like from second grade up through freshman year of college, I wanted to be a teacher. And so like always been interested in doing something that helps people. Ended up in nonprofit, thought at some point like, oh yeah, I want to be a director of a nonprofit agency, make all this like big change, da da da. And I worked hard and I put a lot into it, and I became an executive director of a community nonprofit, and I got burnt all the way out. And then I switched into higher ed and also walked into a sticky kind of situation, and I got burnt all the way out again. And so now I do some different diversity, equity, and inclusion work, do a lot of work with trying to create trauma-informed workplace. And I'm in a season of my life where I look at my job, and it's important to me that whatever I'm doing for paid labor is something that gives back to my community in some way. And so having that, but also not having that be like the defining thing in my life. And so I'm in a stage where I say no a lot. No, I don't have the capacity to do that. No, I don't want to do that. I just don't want to. I usually don't tell people it's because I don't want to. I come up with a more professional answer. And then looking at things outside of my life that bring me joy, that are fulfilling for me. My spiritual practice in connecting with my ancestors, cooking, growing things. I'm one of those people where in COVID I got like 50 plants in my house. They're not all with us today, but many of them are, and new ones come on the regular. So like that brings me a lot of calm and a lot of joy. Moving my body, like I like going to the gym, but I also just like going on walks. And so finding ways then to just be, I feel like more whole is a way that I would describe it, and really nurturing too my relationships outside of work, especially my friendships. Like those things are really, really important to me. So my work is cool, and I do good work, and it's important work, and I like it, and I'm passionate about it. And I got this whole life outside of work that, aside from having to pay bills, is really like more important to me than the work that I'm doing for a paycheck.
Yeah, that's good.
I think that a lot of you all have kind of spoken to the path of ambition that you are pursuing, what that looks like. So I'm going to speak from a perspective of someone that is coming into their ambition, and kind of just like what helped me get to this space was understanding my worth and kind of like healing the parts of me that again, like what we hear like society telling us things about ourselves, and like kind of unlearning that just to learn who it actually is that I am. And I think that for a lot of people that, like you talked about Dr. Harkon's growing up with a very supportive family, right? And I feel like not a lot of people have that kind of like person to build them up from the start, right? And so just being able to recognize that if you are one of those people, how important it is for you to start from that foundation, right? Because it's like if you're trying to build this ambitious structure on this unstable foundation, it's just going to crumble. So right now I'm in the process of building my own foundation and getting stability there, to recognize my true potential, my true growth. And I think that like for a lot of people, if you're struggling to find your ambition, like that could just be probably the place to start, right? It doesn't have to be that you have big goals, but just like knowing what you stand for, and then also making a choice on that decision. Because for a long time, I would basically be my own obstacle, right? Like self-sabotaging behavior, you know, like if you don't really believe that you can do it, you won't do it, right? And so you just find ways to sabotage yourself along the way. So just kind of recognizing the patterns that I've been falling into and how I've been kind of like setting myself up to not succeed. Yeah.
I think about, similar to you, Carol, like if you would have asked me what I wanted to be when I was 5, I wouldn't have said like, oh, I want to be working in diversity, equity, inclusion, and higher ed. Like I wouldn't have even said that in undergrad. And so I think that the thing that has helped me and what I'm now, like in my 30s, like really trying to lean into is just giving myself space to explore like the things that feel good, the things like where I'm in it and I'm like, dang, like I really like this. Like I find joy in it, and like being okay with being like, this wasn't typically would have been written down on the plan. Like this wasn't a goal to do this thing, but now that you've discovered the thing, like you have permission to explore like what it could be, whether that's gonna get you paid or it's not gonna get you paid. Like you can explore it, and it doesn't have to be like the typical thing that would have come next. Like it doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm gonna get another degree, although like I'm doing that. Like it can be a lot of other things. And I think similar to you, Taryn, like I'm just learning to really cultivate a life outside of like the work that I do that I enjoy, because I never want my identity to be wrapped up in like what I do. I want to be able to say like when I go home, I have a cool life when I'm not at work, and I love my work. I love working with students, love getting to pour into and coach students, but like I know when I go home, like my students go home to their families, right? And so I've got to be able to go home to something that I love, that brings me energy, that brings me joy, and that fulfills me, because I don't expect my job to be able to do that, right? We work within the system, and so I just know the system's like never gonna fill the parts of me that I need it to, right? Because it wasn't built for me. It's not built to see me thrive and succeed, and so I'm not gonna put all of my weight and all of my eggs in that basket, because I just know like that's not where it's gonna be.
I think for me, so I work in sports, and even I'm only 22, but if you would have told me at 6, at 10, at 15, you're going to be working in sports, I'd be like, yeah, okay. I hated sports when I was younger. I thought it was so stupid. I was like, why are people yelling at the screen? They can't hear you. They still going to get a paycheck, and you still going to be sitting on the couch. I thought it was dumb. But here we are. And I think, I don't know, like as I've gotten older, and kind of just my circle of friends and the people I've been around, I just always remember like sports was the thing that brought people together. Sports was the thing that, you know, nothing else kind of mattered. And so I think it was that kind of got me into that arena. And then now, like, that's what drives me. Not the sport itself, but more so just the pathway, the excitement, the bringing people together. And then for me specifically, the thing that drives me and the thing that makes me continue to be ambitious is knowing that there's people after me, knowing that because, you know, sports is not a big, you know, black woman field. But when you're in it, you're in it. And the amount of people who already just me at 22 are like, oh my gosh, like, Aaliyah, you're so cool, like, you're really doing it. Or just people from my high school are like, you know, I'm proud of you. Like, I went to high school in Atlanta.
What high school did you go to?
Southwest DeKalb.
All right, Southwest
Yeah,
DeKalb.
yeah. And so, you know, my high school is real famous for a lot of different things, but it's not an area that, like, everybody just is like, yep, I'm a doctor and I'm a this. It's one of those, like, you got to put in the work. And so just having people be like, you know, I'm proud of you, or just other black women like, hey, like, how did you get this? I'm wanting to get into that. Like, you know, that is what keeps me going. That's what, you know, allows me to continue to go on this path of sports, because I know, like, somebody's watching me. I don't know who, I don't know why, but somebody's watching me, and something that I might think is small to me, or like things that I think I'm not doing enough, there's somebody that, and I think about this all the time too, because me freshman year, I'm literally doing now what I wanted to do freshman year. So I think about that so much, because when I think about things that, you know, I'm like, I'm not doing enough, I need to do more, like, I need to have this opportunity. I'm like, I'm doing what I wanted to do. I'm having the experience that I wanted. So I guess that kind of what pushes me forward.
I think it's interesting that you said something about, like, am I doing enough? Because I feel like that's something that for black women in particular, there's always that question of, is this enough? Am I, you know, feminine enough? Am I black enough? Am I working hard enough? Am I struggling enough? Am I thriving enough? Am I taking care of other people enough? There's always this sense of, you know, are you doing enough, and should I be doing more? And I don't know if other folks necessarily carry that burden, but I know we absolutely carry that in so many ways.
Yeah, I think it's like the shedding of that expectation of self to like show up and like put on a perfect front, right? Because none of us are perfect, but I think sometimes we put on the mask, right? For whatever reason, like, I'm strong and like I've got my shit together. In actuality, like, shit's always falling apart, but we gonna show up and like make it work and make it do what it do. But yeah, I think it is like a constant sort of just like process of like asking yourself like, why does this have to be enough? And like, and what is enough for me, right? Because like, what's enough for the woman next to me, could be different. And like, if that works for her, it works for her. Then what works for her probably isn't gonna work for me, right? But I think that, yeah, like that's a heavy burden that I don't know if, there's a part of me that wants to ask the crowd, but the crowd's not a part.
Put it in the comments below.
But also, it makes me think of like, enough for who, right?
Yeah.
Like, enough for who?
Well, that's a big question, right? And when you break that down, like if you dig deep enough, you're gonna find the roots, right? And so you break that down, that's like enough for this society that wasn't made, like Jasmine said earlier, that wasn't made for Black women especially to thrive in. And I know for me, I've had to do and still practice like a lot of unlearning because when you're raised up in the US as a Black woman, then there are like all these different messages that you're getting. And, I look back and I'm like, am I strong? Yeah, I am strong. But because I had to be, and people throw out like, oh, you're so strong as a compliment. And I don't remember where I heard or read this, but then someone was like, we need to stop telling people that if we don't also acknowledge the conditions that force them to be strong, the traumas that they've had to go through, the oppression that people have had to go through to be strong, and we should really be addressing those things. And when I started to figure out like, oh, it's not actually about me, like it's all these systems outside of me, and I was like, oh, well, fuck that. Like, what if there's I don't know if you guys have heard of the NAP ministry and NAP Bishop, Trisha Hershey. She's like, go lay down and rest, take a nap. And I was like, oh, I can do that. Cool. Like one of my favorite things to do now is to lay on my couch and daydream. Love that.
I'm gonna take a nap.
Look,
I'm gonna take a nap.
One thing about it, I'm gonna lay that head on down.
She gonna leave you
8 hours.
I might not do that because you can't athletic, but I'm gonna go to sleep. But I guess speaking kind of all of those things, when you're in your field, whatever that may be, how do you kind of navigate kind of what you were saying earlier, like I'm on my shit and I know I'm good at it. So like, how do you navigate without coming off as like, because we already have that stigma of like, if I do speak up for myself or if I do, show y'all that I'm me for real, I'm her. It's like a stigma of like, oh, like you're doing too much or like you're this and you're that. So how do you kind of make your mark in a way that isn't, not that I care how people feel, because I really actually don't. But how do you kind of navigate that?
Because when you're playing by their rules, it's kind of like you hold a lot of power. And that makes me think of like something that Dr. Hargans always says, where it's like you have to figure out what it is that you're worth losing, right? Like what's worth losing. So, yeah. But for me, I think it's really interesting because, especially like showing up in these spaces and kind of like, sorry, I'm gonna pause for a minute. I'll let you guys go first.
I'm as open about the ways that I fail as I am about the ways that I fly. And I think that's the balance. So I'm gonna stunt, because,
As you should.
As I should, right? But I'm not gonna pretend like I'm perfect either.
Yeah.
You're gonna see how hard won this stunt was because I got 22 rejects. So I just got a book contract. I've been working on this for 14 months, like sending out cover letters to literary agents and to publishing houses. Like I've wanted to be a published author since I was a kid. And so many rejections. I mean, all year long rejections. And I'm as vocal about it as I'm about to be about getting this contract because people need to see, like, I'm not just magic. I'm not actually Black Girl Magic. I'm magical and everything, but I worked for 14 months on just that part of it, and I worked my whole career on the part that came before it. So I'm gonna talk about those things. When it's a bestseller, I'm gonna highlight that. When I, all of these things that I know that I speak and manifest in my life, I'm as transparent about that as when I failed to eat triple P, as when I, like all of these failures that are just a normal part of life, the rejections. I'm gonna be really clear about those. So my Instagram feed or my social media is gonna be both and. And that way, I'm a full human person, and it's not like I'm not the strongest person in the world. I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I understand my gifts and I understand the things that I'm continuing to grow on. And so sometimes people who choose to be in competition because that's their worldview, they struggle with that. I'm not competing with anyone. You know what I mean? Like, I'm here to be a hand, a high five, a hug, and I'm gonna do me. And if you're still in that mindset based on supremacy culture where you're in competition because you think that's gonna afford you something, then it will be hard to watch somebody thrive in ways that you want it to thrive, but you're not thriving. For me, I love it. I get off on seeing Black women in particular go up, especially in the things I want to do in the future, because I'm like, she did it. Let me hit her up. Girl, what did you do? Like, I want to know too. For me, it lets me know that they made a way for me. Yeah. And I'm to your point, then I'm gonna make a way for all the people I mentor. So there are hundreds of people who are like, well, how do you do this or how do you do that? And I'm like, okay, here's the blueprint. Like, here are my essays. Here's how I did it. And one of my mentees a few years ago, probably like 7 years ago now, wow, was like, I'm coming for your spot. Like, I wanted that. I'm like, you don't gotta come for my spot. You can have it. I'm not planning on being in the same spot when you get there. I made this space for you. and he was like, that's a mindset shift for me, because I just always felt like I had to, like, and I'm like, no, there's nothing that you can take from me.
Right.
When I'm willing to give the map, and your map might look different.
And that white supremacy culture, I think, is very key, right? That's something that we're taught, is that everything is a competition, right? We have to kind of get some leg up in the race. But, like, I feel like, especially in our communities, that's not how we think, right? Because it's all about uplifting everyone. So, again, breaking that down and recognizing, like, that's not something that we believe, and that's also not something that we have to carry forward through in these spaces, right? So, that's really
I don't know.
powerful.
Some Black women believe it. I had an experience, and a Black woman actually threatened my whole career. And I was like, bet you won't say it to my face.
What?
We ain't never You're not going to get me caught up. I got a whole mortgage and a car payment. But there was a situation where I was doing some work that was supposed to fall under someone else's sort of portfolio. And I'm like, don't be mad at me that I'm doing the work that you're supposed to be doing. And if you're going to make threats, don't send them through no message. Like, you know where my office is. You quickly pull up, and we can, like, figure this out right here. And so the person that told me that, they were like, well, she wanted me to let you know that sometimes people will call other people who are not on their reference list. And I was like, is that a threat?
Right.
And the person was like, yes, I took it. I said, well, I don't do threats. That's what I don't do. I do a lot of stuff, but I'm 100% with the shits lady. I will not 100% with them. And so, like, I would see her in places, and, like, she would make a beeline to me, and I'm like, not today, Satan. You will not. I'm going to let you sit in this discomfort of seeing me in spaces where you're supposed to be, doing the job you're supposed to be doing. There's a reason people are calling me to ask me things and not calling you. So, like, listen.
Have the day you
deserve.
Have the day you deserve.
That's one of my favorite blessings.
It is. Look, that is a blessing. That is 100% a blessing. But, like, there is this competition that sometimes happens with Black women, particularly when there's power involved. And so it's like, listen, sis, I see how dope you are. I see how much younger you are than me. I see how much flyer you are than me. Like, I see all, like, you're giving everything that I used to give that I don't give anymore. And it's intimidating sometimes for people. And, like, I'm not on that. Like, I am on the down. Like, I got so many more days behind me than I do ahead of me. And so I'm not always going to be in the spaces that I occupy. So for me, I have an obligation to, like, create that space where somebody says, I ain't going to be in the same job. I shan't, and I won't be in this same mess. And so for me, there's an obligation to create the pathway for other Black women who want to be in the space and who want to do the work that I do. Like, come in and do it better than I did. Come in and do it differently than I did. Come in and do it however you need it to be done. Because I'm not supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be retired chilling.
Supreme Court part-time.
Said I'm just going to fashion.
Yeah, yeah. You know,
Supposed to be a fashion week.
right. But I'm in Supreme Court, and so here I am. But I think it is. Yeah, is there some competition? I think so. Because I have felt it. But I don't think everybody moves in that sort of way. But I do think that there are some folk. You know, all skin folk ain't kin folk, and so there's often that crabs in a barrel sort of kind of thing.
And I don't think that the competition isn't there, right?
Yeah.
I think that it's just, where did this idea of the competition come from?
Yeah. Because there can only be one Black woman in the space, and yeah. So how often do you see like several Black women in leadership positions in an organization? You may see one, you might see two, maybe two if you're lucky. I'm fortunate I work in a space where there's three of us, but I'm the one to be wilding out. In the meetings, I'm the one that's just like, this is trash, y'all. This ain't the move, right? And so there's a level of risk in being authentic in those spaces. But for me, like the like, y'all can't fire me for it, so.
But that's one thing that I really appreciate about you and being able to work with you is like I have literally heard you give feedback in spaces of like someone's like, oh, how was this event? You're like, it was very boiled chicken.
Oh my God.
It's a little unseasoned.
Oh goodness. And then I was like, ooh. That was in here. I don't know that was supposed to come out of that.
Like, you know, and for me, I'm the baby of my family. I'm an Aries, like, so I like to push the envelope. I also recognize I have a mortgage and bills, so I have to be careful in balancing those things. And sometimes you just like, you drop something and see how'd everybody react, and just toss it and see what happens. And so then for me, some of it is seeing like, okay, how much can I show up as myself? And I feel fortunate to be at a point, not only in my career, but also just like personally and mentally, where I can say, if I hit a wall with like how authentically can I show up, then that's a sign to me that I don't need to be there. And I recognize that that's not everyone can say that. You know, like when I was starting off in my career and just having my first big girl job that only paid $28,000, then it was like, well, you have to pay for things. And so not everyone is going to be able to do that. But for me, that is something that I didn't know I needed to aspire to. Or like I didn't know that was something I wanted. That wasn't a comfort that I knew about. And now that I'm here, I try to encourage people who are younger than me, but also sometimes who are older than me, who are still doing some unlearning themselves. I try to encourage other people to like think about what their spot looks like, what that looks like for them.
And I love that you said that too, because it's not even about the age that matters, right?
Yeah.
It's just getting to that point. It doesn't matter when it happens, right? So don't beat yourself up if like you're further down the line and someone's figured it out in their 20s and you're just now figuring it out then. Just like having grace too.
I am thinking about, I'm going back to, I think a couple people have talked about like this concept of particularly Black women and being a part of your village in whatever way like that works, right? And so in this idea of like competition, right? Because I think oftentimes in friendship and in community, like there can be these weird tension things that come up. And so what does it look like cultivating just like genuine relationships with Black women or just like other women in general, and how are you like maintaining those relationships as you grow?
I'm gonna say that my greatest gift in friendship and relationship with Black women is extending Black women the most compassion and forgiveness. So the room to repair after a rupture is essential, because I'm not gonna hold this "you messed up once and you're out of my life" mindset with Black women, especially when I know what type of trauma most of us are contending with. And I think that grace, that compassion, that care with each other makes the difference. I've got friendships that have been people who've been my friends since 99. You know what I mean? Where we've had iterations of our relationship as we have evolved. Like, we fell out about something. It's like, you in this friendship are worth more to me than for me to be upset about this one big thing that happened. How do we repair after this? How do we reach back out to each other and correct, forgive, apologize, make amends, all of those things. So the apology languages are real for me, especially as it relates to Black women. And I know our context. I especially know the context of the Black women with whom I'm in relationships. So I'm like, I get, and I'm a psychologist, so I'm always conceptualizing, right? I get how this history could lead to this moment. And I care about you enough to ask you about it, to invite you to have a conversation about it, to love each other and to forgive each other. And hopefully they care about me enough to apologize, or I care about them enough to apologize when I fuck up. And that is important for me. Black women are going to get that from me before anybody else gets that from me. It's going to be my immediate family that I created, and then Black women. Like, that's who's going to get that. And there was another piece that stood out to me. It's not just the relationship repair part of it, but it's like how we show up for each other makes a difference. Because if I have Black women who are choosing to be child-free, Black friends who are single, Black friends who are married, Black women friends who are professionals, Black women friends who are emerging in their career, they're going to require different types to show up, and our society gives us like these scripts of what type of show up are acceptable. So it's like birthdays, weddings, sometimes that's it, right? And it's like, no, my sis said show up because she done got a dog, and that's her boo, and we're showing up for that. You know what I mean? We're doing a dog shower, like whatever it is.
At a birthday party, and she want the village to pull up on at the park.
Otherwise we risk like partnership privilege, where it's like, oh, well, you're not engaged, so we're not coming. What? And we do that to each other all the time. So those, like, understanding what type of showing up your friends really need from you and how they want to be celebrated. Like, one of my friends is a fashion stylist. I have her style me for anything that I do, because that's her brand, that's what she's building, that's what she cares about. Like those type of things, knowing your friends, caring about them enough to not just affirm the things that society says should be affirmed.
I think that's really helpful for me is just kind of like in developing and creating friendships is having friends that don't believe in like monolithic views of Blackness, right? Especially because like for me, my racial identity is something that I struggle with because it's always been put on trial and called to question. So just like being able to like, again, have that compassion and showing up in spaces where you're like, yes, like I understand, I recognize you, and I understand that also the way that you present in your Blackness doesn't take away or add value. It is one extrapolation of that whole, right? So just like having that expansive view. Because I feel like, especially like an undergrad, I went to the University of Louisville, so it was predominantly, again, another PWI, and I was on the rowing team. And kind of just like always having every action that I did like questioned because of the way that I was presenting, right? And so like I remember one time one of my teammates said like, just to give a background of like rowing is a very like uppity privileged sport. Like one boat costs like $60K. So, and people on our team were getting recruited. So they obviously went to schools that could afford boats that were $60K. So they're well off girls, right? And so it's just kind of like being the only person of color on the team, first of all, and there's like 70 odd something upper privileged girls. I would just always hear like really very monolithic views of Blackness, and then coming into a space where I am at another PWI, but in Black spaces where we understand that like we're so diverse, right? And it's almost like giving me that grace to be diverse instead of conforming to this one way, right? Because when I was around my white teammates, if I did something that didn't conform to their ideas of Blackness, it was kind of like, oh, well, are you really Black? But like versus when I am in these Black spaces where people are like, I'll do something weird, I'll just like be me, and that's never a question that comes up, right? It's not my Blackness that's on question. It's just like, oh, that's just Cynthia the Sin, just how she is. So yeah.
I think for me, especially like being younger and trying to navigate friendships, building friendships, it's a lot different. I have to understand that like everybody's still trying to figure out who they are. So having friendships where we're all growing to different places at different speeds, you kind of have to step back and understand that when you're making these friendships. But then I also am very big on, I'm gonna see you for who you are. I'm gonna see you for who you are right now. I'm not gonna judge you on it, but I'm gonna see you. And that's not to say that things can't change in the future, because I'm gonna root for you regardless what you do. I'm gonna root for you because you're a black woman. I'm always in your corner. I might not be, wiping the sweat off of you, but I'm in the corner. I'm back there. I'm here. But I'm gonna see you for who you are. But just like knowing and understanding that people are still trying to figure out who they are. And so I can't judge you for, doing something towards me or doing this when you haven't even figured it out. I haven't figured it out. We trying to figure it out. But I do think, with that, and especially like being in college, being an undergrad, being in grad school, is like the way that people were raised or the things that people have had to go through shapes who they are. And so while you can grow out of that, we're not here right now. And that's okay. I'm gonna let you rock out. And I'm gonna rock out over here. And but I'm gonna let you rock out where you are. So I think for me, and then just when I do have that circle, when I do find those people, it's like we are all on so many different pathways, but I'm also gonna be like, if I hear, I need a this, that, my girl, I got you. My girl here, I'm gonna put you on. Or like knowing like when my nurse friends, I'm like, look at Nurse Bay, y'all, she's so cute. Like I'm your biggest fan. Cause one thing about, I'm your biggest fan, and I'm gonna let everybody know. Everybody gonna know this my girl. So I think just being able to, be that support, but then also understanding like they have to kind of be that for you too. You can't just pour and not get it back. And it's okay if that's not that friendship, but you have to sit down and have that conversation with yourself and have that conversation with them and be like, listen, I love you real bad. Not feeling the love here. So let's figure out how we can adjust this. And that just goes back to showing up how they want to be shown, like how they would like for you. So the way I show up for Jasmine might not be the way that I show up for my best friend in Atlanta, or for one of my mentees. It's not the same. So navigating those spaces and having those real conversations about what you need, and then knowing that, okay, if I can't give you that, that's okay. And I'm gonna tell you, I don't have that capacity to give you that. It's not gonna work for me. But I love you real bad.
I think that as I have gotten older, one of the things that has helped me to maintain like really healthy friendships, particularly with Black women, because like you said, like we grow and evolve at different speeds, right? And we're in different seasons of life at different times, right? And so I think I've had to readjust my expectations about how you showed up in one season is not the same way that you have to show up in another based on the context of your life. And when I release you from the expectation of like, well, 2 years ago you were able to do this, this, and this, and now you can't, or you're unable to, you don't have the capacity to, and I'm upset. When I have to think back, like, how much has changed from 2 years ago to now for you and also for her? And I think that goes back to just like the grace and compassion and the forgiveness, right? That like I'm always gonna make space for you to grow and evolve, and whether that's with me or it's not with me, like I'm gonna own that like we all are growing and evolving, and so that means that the dynamics of our relationships are always shifting, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like it's actually very healthy for the dynamics of relationships to have to shift based on the two people that are in relationship with each other. But one thing about it, I'm always be rooting for you. Like I'm always gonna be, if I could put professional hype woman for Black women on my resume from 1991 until present, I would.
My life is
like my that's like my life's work is like seeing Black women, regardless, you're one of my best friends or you're just someone who I just happen to know or see. Like I'm always gonna be like, and she did that, that's her, and put some respect on her name, because I think we need that, right, in a society where society tries to tell us like you're not, right, to affirm that like no, you actually are, like, and you should be and you can be, and I want you to be, and if you want to be, like, let me know how I can help and support and push you, but also hold you accountable, right? You can't be out here telling me, like, girl, like, I'm gonna go get my PhD, and then what you doing then? Like, why the application not filled out? What we need to do, we need to get a resume together, or I want to start a business, and she's yelling right now. That wasn't even a attack at you.
She's screaming.
But like, when you trust me enough to like share your goals with me, like also know that like I love you enough to hold you accountable, and I'm not gonna let you sit on potential if that's not, you know, if you've articulated like that's not actually what you want to do.
But I think one of the dopest things in the world is like affirmation from other Black women.
Like, it's a love language.
Man,
It is my favorite.
it is like other people can tell you things and be like, oh, you look nice or whatever, but let a Black woman tell you, and it is like you hype for the listen, you're weak.
Yeah.
And like you move different, and like you stand different, and like for the rest of the day you will be in a completely different space. And I don't know if other folk have that, but I know that for me, when that happens to me, it is so powerful. But I always try to do that for other Black women because I know there's so much power in that. And it, like, we could be in the grocery store and I'll be like, okay, sis, come on, shoes, come on, boots. Like, it's just an acknowledgement that I see you, and I see, like,
Blessing.
yeah. Yeah, and we get so many other messages that we're not this, we're too much of this, we shouldn't do this, we're not enough of the, like, we get too many other messages. But affirmation from other Black women, like, that's it for me.
Every single time it is a top tier experience.
At 100%.
Regardless of where it happens.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, not you seeing me. Okay, sis.
Because we're just not offering affirmation for ratchet things.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if you tell me, I believe it. Because you're not just saying it just to say it.
Right.
I think we kind of all touched on just in professional settings and friendships, that whole like capacity and boundary thing. So kind of just like, what are ways that you set boundaries, and how do you kind of enforce them when those situations arise, especially when in terms of like, you know, you have those people or those situations that, you know, like you give a little bit of extra pass for it. So how do you kind of navigate that?
I'm gonna listen because I don't do it. Like, I recognize that I recognize like no is like a semi-full sentence for me sometimes.
It's a comma.
It is. It's a little no.
It's a hypothesis.
It's no. Is it a no? But it's a consideration. Like if I move this around, it could be a yes. But I also recognize, thinking about the impact of things on people, and like when people are struggling, and if someone is coming to me for help, like there's a part of me that feels a strong, particularly if it's a Black woman, like a strong sense of obligation to figure out how to say yes to something. And then about 2 seconds after I say yes, I'll be like, damn it, now I can't take a nap. Like
Now I can't emphasis.
And so I don't have a good answer for that. So I'm hoping other folks have because that's something that I recognize that I need to learn. 100% got to learn myself. Listen, Taryn will tell you in a second. No, not today.
I mean, honestly, I think some of my ability to do that was like I was raised in a mixed race household, and so like my dad is Black, my mom was white and Filipino, and I describe it as having been raised with like a white privilege mindset. In some ways, that's where I do a lot of unlearning, y'all. But some of it was like being taught unabashedly that like if you are in an interaction, any kind of relationship, not just romantic, platonic, professional, whatever, with somebody, and like they take from you and never give, then you don't need to be interacting with that person. And that, like, I remember like elementary school having that instilled in me, and so that for me was some of my foundation. And even with that though, there was like I try to give people grace, so I've done a lot of reflection around like what are my hard red flags in interactions with other people, and if someone shows one of those, whether in interaction with me or I see them treating someone else that way, and I'm like, that's not somebody who I need to be around. And then there are like some yellow, some question marky flags, and with those, like, I do try to give people grace, especially other Black women, other folks who hold marginalized identities, because it's hard out here. And I recognize that someone else's journey may be something that like I have never conceptualized. I might not know what's going on with them, and so I try to give a level of grace. Usually I'll give people second chances. Honestly, sometimes depending on my relationship with the person, like I might give you a third or fourth chance even. But then if I see that like I am continuously uncomfortable in interacting with someone, or like I walk away from my interactions with them not feeling 100 about myself, then that to me is a prompt that like, okay, I need to do some reflection, whether that looks like a meditation, journaling, external processing, talking to a friend, a therapist, just figuring out why am I feeling this way in these interactions with this person. And then if it's like, oh, well, that's someone who you don't need to be around, then I try to find a way to not be around them. And I say that as someone who hates conflict. Like, I hate conflict so much, it makes me uncomfortable. And I know that those boundaries are, one, a gift to myself, and two, if it's boundaries with someone who I do care about, that is also a gift to them. That is a way for me to say, I love you and I want you in my life, but it has to be within these parameters for me to still be like thriving and living my best life, which is hard to do and feels uncomfortable. And even like the more I've done it, I don't know if it's felt less uncomfortable as I've done it more. So I'm not going to be out here and say like, oh yeah, it's easy, because it's not. Especially when it's people who you care about. But it's something where like when I think about how I want to live a life filled with joy and rest, because like when you don't set boundaries with people and when you don't hold the boundaries that you set with people, I stress the fuck out all the time. I get anxious about it, and that's not restful for me.
Yeah. I'm a recovering people pleaser, so boundaries are really hard. I think I have gotten better at, I'm also anti-conflict. It makes my stomach churn. And so for a long time, I didn't articulate like what I needed, what I wanted, or what my expectation or the boundary was, because I was like, like this feels like a conflict to even communicate this, like feels like a conflict. I have since gotten over that hurdle, but because I'm a recovering people pleaser, I just have not gotten to practice that enough. And so I think I try to lean into the moments where I'm like, this is gonna make my stomach churn to have to tell you like, I really want to and I can't. Or to be like, I actually don't want to do that, and I'm just struggling to figure out a way to like package this for it to be received. I want you to receive it well. And so I think I just have to lean into those moments when I know like this actually is going to be very uncomfortable for me. And sometimes depending on the person, I just have to tell them like, it's actually very uncomfortable for me. It's a hard thing for me to have to tell you like, I can't do this, or like I'm not going to continue to participate in this kind of environment or relationship or whatever it is. And as a recovering people pleaser, like we working on boundaries all the time.
I think that's why we get along so well, because I'm not gonna be able to do a gangster. But I think it's because it's either one or the other with me. It's either if you're in that place where I'm like, no matter what you need, cool. It's very few people, but if you're there, you're there. Other than that, I'm be like, yeah, I actually don't want to do this. And I'll tell her real quick, I actually don't want to do that. I actually don't want to go. Love you. But I'm not gonna be able to do it. Like I just, because like we said, like no is a sentence. That's it and that's all. There's not a why, because I said so. Because I don't want to, because I don't have the capacity, because I can't, because if I'm not going to be able to show up with my whole 100% complete authentic self, I'm not going to come, because that's a disservice to you and a disservice to me, because I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to be able to do it. Love you, but I can't.
My therapist told me to take a breath before I answer an invitation. And I was like, ooh. All right, girl. Because I don't really have a hard time saying no to the things I don't want to do, but I have a hard time saying no to the things I want to do that I don't have the capacity for.
Yeah.
And so my plate is
Always full.
full Thanksgiving. You know what I mean? Like, too many things on it. And then I'm tired to the point we made earlier. I always get 8 hours of sleep. So I can't spend the whole 16 doing for other people. And I thought I could operate like that.
Yeah.
And she was just like, you know, it's not even that you have to say no. It's just that you need to not let yes be a reaction. So
Yes, is a reaction.
So taking a deep breath.
That was it.
Do I want to do this? Sure, maybe I do. But what do I have to say no to say yes to this?
Yeah.
And is that something I want to say no to if I'm thinking about my well-being? And that's the practice that I've been in, and I still struggle with it because it feels so exciting. You know, like the things that I want to do, I'm like, ooh, I could squeeze this in on Saturday. You know, I do really
2 months from now.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's like, how much does that yes cost?
Thank you. Exactly. Then that's
What
the
does that
thing. She was like, so what did that cost you? Okay. And is that one of the things that you said you wanted to prioritize in 2023 that you're allowing to be taxed because of this? So I have to balance that.
Yeah.
But the breath that I take gives me a lot of information, like where am I storing the stress in my body? Who do I think I'm going to upset? You know, why do I invest in their emotions like I can control them? And so consent and control are the two ways I think about boundaries. I want to be able to consent into whatever I do, and I want people to be able to do that with me. So I want people to be able to feel like they can tell me no, just like I can tell them no, and that they're not going to be judged or coerced or anything like that. I learned that as a sex researcher. And then control. I don't actually want autonomy in agency in anyone's life but mine. And so I have to have full command of my own sense of self and my own agency for other people to have that of theirs. I have an overdeveloped sense of responsibility. And that's a childhood thing, you know, and I have to release that. And so I'm just continuing to work on releasing it. But I've become a lot better at my boundaries in the past 2 years than I was before because it's just way too exhausting. And I would rather feel well.
Yeah. And on that note,
I mean, we good. That was good. Yeah. Snaps and claps and Black Girl Magic or something.
we're gonna wrap it up.
All I got,
This.
drink water, mind your business, and stay black.
You're right. Look,
That's it.
this will
Period.
I rest.
Carol on the Supreme Court.
It's me.
Yeah. Now, Your Honor, you know.